Good. First item on the agenda is seating of alternates. See that Pete is not here. I'd like to seat Bill Coach for Kate Rieger. That's it. Seating of alternates. Public comments? No public comments. We'll move on to the main agenda item, which is discussion of the budgets. And it's really kind of an open discussion. Any suggested changes to the budget or not changes?
I'd like to make a suggestion.
The objective is that we come up with numbers that we want to take to the public hearing.
I'd like to make a suggestion that we listen to a presentation by Mr. Jeremy. We'll look at some of the numbers and have some information you'd like to present to us.
Obviously, I think everybody knows that if we don't make a change here, we're going to be forced to make one change, and that's going to be to the referendum line item, because we're going to be voting more than once, and we're going to be adding. I have had time to catch some of your ear over the last week, and thought about this and how can we get a somewhat more modest proposal put together that I've taken some time. Right now we're at roughly 6.01%. I don't think New Hartford's seen anything like that in my recent memory. But I came up with a two-option scenario for the board to consider tonight that is simplistic in nature and I think fair as a starting point, as I see as a minimum for us to consider as we go forward. So if you like, I'll pass them out to you guys here. And I have the computer before me so that we can actually make the changes as we go. I've obviously already done it. I'll wait until everybody gets their hands on it so they can read along as we go.
One extra.
Before we start, I just want to remind everybody of last year's events. Last year, the general government budget was zeroed out. We got, I think it wasn't an exact zero, it was $1,800 in additional spending for the general government, squeezed pretty hard. Local Board of Ed saw a 1.7% increase. Region 7 saw a 2% increase. If you'll see what you have before you, I have an option 1 before you, and it says the following proposal includes 4 basic changes to the previously submitted budget that we have. If anybody needs extra copies, I can make them. But there's been no changes since we met last month. They would include the following. And as we all recall, Region 7 has modified their budget down from the 2.45% spending increase to 1.98%. If we were asked the local Board of Ed to at least meet the Region 7 level at 1.98%, right now, that would have an impact of roughly 0.5% on our budget. If we were to propose item 2, a reduction in the local education capital to switch the 5-year capital plan, I think we'd have support from the Board of Selectmen to further the building project when Bakerville Elementary is paid off. But we would allow them to do some work at the school. If we would cap their capital at $140,000, that would be an increase of $55,000 over last year's spending. But that would bring the spending down. Note on that, if we make that change, that would pull out roughly $125,000 in state reimbursement. But there's something there. There's new money in general operating, and there's some new money in capital, of which we could discuss variations on the theme. Number 3, if we reduce the general government capital down from the 310, it's in there, and I think it's 310,500 to be specific, but I was using round numbers. Cut roughly 40,000 there. And number 4, increase the amount of fund balance used as revenue, which is currently about $145,000 up to $300,000. The sum total of these changes would get you down under 3% to what I believe is exactly 2.88. I've had a chance to catch a few people's ears here that some people I thought were at least interested in listening to the proposal. And I thought there was some level of support at that level. But I included as a second option, if this board didn't feel like that went far enough, obviously the second option could be to flatline capital last year's rates, which would then bring us from 6% to roughly 2.45%. And just for the numbers you see down at the bottom there, that would be an additional $75,000 in cuts prorated. Of course, that starts to tap into the vision that the Board of Ed had and the vision that the selectmen had for jobs that's to be completed over the year. Of course, it's never easy. So, that was my proposal. We had 3 other things on the table that we needed to discuss that I did not implement, which will have some variation. We talked about the prior year taxes, fees and fines, and town clerk revenue. We had projections from Annie's year end that showed that we thought that the prior year taxes was a little underestimated. You know, she was looking at a $200,000 number where we've been budgeting $150,000. Maybe we could slide that up a little bit in a mutually agreed decision here. And anything at this point helps bring the number down. The fees and fines, which we had been estimating for the last couple of years at $80,000, have been coming in at roughly $118,000 projected for year end. We could slide that up a little bit. But in the same regard, when we slide those 2 numbers up, what we see is a slowdown in the town clerk's office in the $90,000 range for projection, where we've been budgeting $100 to $110. So, yeah, we could gain a little revenue in those 2 line items, but we probably have to back off the town clerk. Still, I think that there's a little bit of help there we would do it. But I would probably recommend that we went to maybe $175,000 on the prior year taxes, but I'm open to suggestions. The fees and fines, maybe we bumped up to 100, so that we don't end up pushing ourselves into a corner. And then with the projection that we're only at 90, I think maybe we go to the actual there and say, which would agree. So you're looking at 45,000 in new revenue less the 20, so you're looking at a plus 25,000.
Dan, what'd you say the new fees and fines was? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Fees and fines that we've been estimating for the last 2 years at $80,000. The estimate is for year end this year, $118,000. I would suggest that we bump that up somewhat in the $100,000 range, but obviously, again, open to suggestions from the board.
Thank you.
And in your math, in your model, you actually took the $125,000 out of revenue, so that would be associated with reducing the capital fund.
Correct. So I can implement those changes for you now if you want to. As it stands now, I have what we have from the last presentation, but I've run it 6 ways from Sunday.
I see we've got one other proposal, at least heard from everybody else yet, but I see Maria's got a proposal. Any comments regarding what Dan is suggesting?
I think it's a good direction for it now. Maybe we can do it a little bit better. Maybe they go from 6+% down to 2 to 3 is considering what regional stimulus would is. It is a good step. I like the fact that we're going to possibly create a building committee for the Anthony doors and windows and possibly look at the roof.
By the way, I did have, again, Dennis Dix, our financial advisor, does all our bond counsel work with Doug Gillette. I again asked him to his face today about prepayment of bonds. You cannot, a bond has to be callable to be to be able to be prepaid. That doesn't mean that we can't create a scenario. We could set money in escrow to prepay, but the bottom line is that the Bakerville bond is not callable and not prepayable, so there's no savings there. The only debt that we have that is worthy of some consideration is sewer and water debt. That is not in our budget. And even then, it would be the equivalent going from the 15-year mortgage to the 30-year mortgage down to the 15-year mortgage. It would actually require them to pay increased debt service on, because when you do refund, I think you have to go to a 20-year note, and theirs are extended out to a longer term, so it actually put more financial pressure on those users to pay a little bit more to pay it off early. So he said if they're struggling with the whole expansion situation right now, the new thing, he would recommend it. If there was no advantage to paying off any of that. So we did discuss how developing a system of the building committee for the school board in that scenario. He said it's not very difficult in terms of building in architectural fees, short-term interest. He did a 10-year projection. He did one on a $500,000 note for them and one on a $1.5 million note without really considering what the state reimbursement would be. I think we'd probably be in the middle. It looked like it would be a little bit higher than $105,000 to $106,000 that we currently have in our budget for Bakerville, but it could be done pretty smoothly. You'd see some increase there, but a lot of our other debt service is coming down. So I think we could probably tackle this under this scenario is if we were patient and held to what the Board of Selectmen, the last board with Tom Cleveart and Bruce and I thought was a good plan. And I think that, I don't want to speak for the current Board of Selectmen, but I think there's reasonable support there to keep the faith in that plan. We could get both those jobs done. Theoretically, the Board of Ed could get 3 years of capital in 2 years. And the taxpayers could do it in a way where there's no huge impact in real estate taxes. And we could get this large issue out of this year's budget. So,
If the Board of Selectmen created the building committee for the Antonian project, how soon do you think the work could actually start taking place? I'm sure Mr. Tucker and the rest of the members of the Board of Education and Dr. Riley are concerned about that because they've come back at least 2 or 3 years in a row now. I'm not holding you on, would it be a year, would it be 2 years, 3 years possibly? I don't know.
we could theoretically go out. I think Dennis was of the opinion that we could do it with, and I know that we talked about the possibility of, in some scenarios, starting them a little bit earlier and taking some fund balance out if we had to double up in 1 year to have a new payment before the Bakerville actually does it. But I think you have, I didn't bring all my notes in on it, specifically what we talked about, but you have to set up your building committee. You need to retain an architect so that they can start going, so you get it finalized. Then you got to get to a referendum or a town meeting, depending on what the choice was. And then you need to acquire a band, so they have construction money, which the issuance fees for the band and things would be built into the bond. I think he said roughly $10,000 in issuance fees. Bands are 1% or less. Very inexpensive financing fees. The bonds, you have disclosure and filings that cost much more. But when could they start? I think if you tasked them to have something ready by spring next year, it works perfect to go in line with the expiration of the Bakerville bond.
So it
Because-
could be completed in 2 years or less.
Because your band would be a 1-year ban, and your Bakerville is set to expire in September of next year, right? So anytime in between, if you started it in the fall, gave them the winter to study it, I don't know if you want to time it to have it with a budget vote or you wanted to do it separately. I think that would be up for the selectmen to consider. But I think it solves the problem. It has the the effect of replacing one payment with the other. It takes the pressure off this budget. One thing he also did say is that if you are considering a bond in the short term, a significant reduction in your fund balance would work against you in terms of what type of bond rating you would have.
To me, if a school renovation project bond was ready sooner than the time frame that you suggested, it wouldn't be a big stretch in my mind to rearrange this at that point in time to start it sooner. Instead of spending the money on capital, you reallocate it to operating, and you have the band payment, okay, while the construction is being done. So instead of spending $140,000 in capital, you might spend $100,000 in band or something like that, if it was ready. Not to rush the start of it. It's not our decision.
Typically, all those fees are rolled into the bond, so there's really nothing in the middle.
It wouldn't have to delay progress if we were really ready to go. What my point is. We could still have it level.
Worst case scenario, you might have to double out and take a little bit out to pay one. That's your worst exposure.
Any other comments on this proposal from the rest of the Board of Finance before we move on to other ideas?
Just one, but if it doesn't make sense to use some of the buildup of cash that we have to pay off existing debt, would it be something to consider to maybe put some of that toward this project that we're thinking of bonding, so that we take on less of a debt and also bring down, so finance maybe 25% with cash that we have and the rest? Just want to throw it out there. It might be a way for us to reduce that.
Possibly, I would sooner use it to smooth out the first payment. If the payments were going to go like this, and then when the other one drops off, it's going to come down there. I would use it to smooth that out, because in terms of paying it down to borrow less, it's a drop in the bucket. I got a question. The proposed reduction in the local education budget to 1.98. Does anybody, do you know how much of a cut that is from what was requested?
Current expenditure is roughly $224,000 increase. Take you down from
That's the remaining increase.
224 and bring you down to 152. 72,000.
$72,000 decrease. Well, I certainly don't think we can around 6%, that's for sure. I don't really think we can come up with a real number for Region 7. We can come up with what we'd like to see it be, but I don't think we can put something together that says, here's what it is, consider it.
Found out we can't put in.
Just the education. Just the education, and I'd like to see this message go back to Region 7, because I'd like them to cut $300,000. I'd like to see, our assessment should only be about an increase of $298,000. We're pushing nearly $16,000 per student. So $300,000, I would cut, just have $328,000 out of it, which more than covers the assessment.
You're saying you'd like to see that cut
I'd like to see $300,000 cut out of the budget. I mean,
Not our assessment.
yeah,
out of the budget.
No. To us, it's 628. I don't mind us getting hit with just the 328,000, cut 300 grand out.
Then you have to change your language, Chip, because you're asking them to cut $600,000 out of the budget, not $300,000.
Well, Yeah, I mean, they've got quite a bit, that means that flat line is zero. They've got the room in there. I went through their budget, they've got the room in there to do it.
But your budget reduction request is, just to be clear about it, is $600,000 roughly.
That's what they would have to do to the district, right, so to reduce our assessment by at least $300,000, that's correct.
How much of a reduction is the regional budget to New Hartford based on the new numbers? I think we're coming in around 1.98.
It's, the allocation goes up 585 instead of the 630 that you're looking at.
So it's 585.
Hold on, I'll just give you the exact number.
It's about 40,000.
585, 501.
Dan, not to correct you, but when I left there last night, the board had agreed on a 2% increase, which was $587,000.
That's the last, that hasn't been reported to us yet. And I think we're still, everyone at this table realizes that the Board of Finance reserves the right, you still meet after the public hearing. So there could be some further modification here. In no way you're setting something in stone here. This is something that we need to take to the public hearing, that people will be able to come in and give opinion on. But then we meet again before we have final adoption. So if there's a final number from Judy to come that I haven't seen an email yet,
Okay.
that would be a modification, but you're talking about a couple $1,000. It might not even move the percentage points.
Yeah, so that would be a 7.51% increase instead of the 8.03.
If you have the numbers, I'd be glad to take them after the meeting and pump them in. We're close here, but thank you for that.
Jim, could you continue? I don't think
All right.
we've heard the rest of
So
it.
300,000 Region 7, then they had 124,000 on the local board of ed. On the capital, I had some questions. The number was 836, that was 526 for board of ed and 310 for the town. So in the 526, was that 526, did that include what was coming back from the state by any chance, or no? Would we get some of that back?
200.
City revenue.
Okay. And what's left over right now?
I'd have to check with Jim, but I think I reported to the board something around $52,000, but I'd have to check. I reported it to the board a month ago.
Okay.
But that was, we had directed you to move ahead with the asbestos and the tiling, asbestos, and the heaters, the gas heaters.
So I showed the capital coming out, total about 604,000, and go ahead and bond it all, which one of you is yours. I was giving 113 to the town and pulling out, cutting 113 from the town and 491 from the Board of Ed. But I was recommending in that 491 that include 35,000 for computers. I would suggest that we move all of that out of operating and into capital, so it's in sync with the other town budget. That would be my suggestion.
Run that CapEx plan.
Yeah, it's kind of screwy the way it is. You know, it's one way for the town and the other way for the Board of Ed.
Yes,
No, I'm saying just run it through again.
Oh,
CapEx.
on the cap?
Yeah.
I had a net decrease of 113 for the town and 491 for the Board of Ed. And that 491, what I would say is, like, for $35,000 in there for the computers, take it out of operating. But my decrease for the Board of Ed was 124,031, and that also includes the 35 coming out for the computers, moving that from operating to capital.
Can we do that though? Can we move money from their budget from one line item to
Well,
another?
they can do it, we asked them to do it the other way the last time, and I think it's only fair, we either have to do it for the town or
Just
the
ask.
other way.
I don't know. Our authority is just to reduce their budget by a certain dollar amount.
Okay, then we can do it. But I think it's a win for them.
It actually is, because in the long run, you'll be, if you don't spend all that computer money in that fiscal year, you'll have it in the capital budget until it's topped out.
So that number for me on the Board of Ed capital is without knowing what the essentials are that they need excluding the windows and doors. So if there's a number, plug that back in. Okay. You guys might think this is dramatic, but I cut 70,000 on the library and 1,000 on Bakerville, 71,000 total. I do not think that we as a town should be funding 2/3 of a non-municipal operation. So my suggestion is we fund it no more than what we fund Bakerville. We fund Bakerville 50%, then we should be funding Beacon at 50%. So I reduced that by 70 and more. And there are some departments I think that can have some cuts. I think you're gonna get a savings now with Nancy leaving and going to be the town clerk in Harwington, so I think that should just be cut completely. And we should do the same thing in some of the other departments. I had an increase of about 0.98%.
Tax increase, leaving revenue the same,
You know, I didn't touch the revenue.
but you need to take 125,000 out of that, so
Yeah.
we'll change it a little bit.
So total increase, if Region 7 were to work with it, would be about $2 grand. Maybe a little bit more of adding some more back into the board of capital. And we get a new combined. That's what you want to do. Be my suggestion.
Jim, have you looked at the user numbers for the library?
Pardon me?
Have you looked at the user numbers, the number of users who use each of the libraries? When you say fund them to the same level,
No, but why should
shouldn't that
I?
come into the equation?
No, but why should I?
Because those are townspeople that are being served.
Doesn't matter to me. Let them charge.
Well, okay, then I can't talk about that.
What's over there every night? Maria, I think you got a conflict of interest, okay? You're being paid by them and you're on the board of finance.
You know, I've heard that before. Every single person in this room will have some kind of a complex because we are some kind of a complex.
Not every
because
person.
we are a
Only
small
food being though. I have no
town.
conflict with
Okay,
man.
I have a business that sells
about that.
advertising. I don't approach people, they come to us.
You're on
I
the
don't
board of
see that
finance.
as a
You're on the
conflict.
board
Thank
of
you very
finance.
much.
You're on the board of finance.
My thing is this, but don't include me in a conflict.
Oh, well, I'm just
Can we
throwing-
get back to the budget?
Just
guys?
throwing that out.
Let's go back to the budget if we could. Okay, we've heard Jim's perspective. In summary, it sounds like really zeroing out this Region 7 school, I think in total, pretty much. 24,000 from local board of ed instead of 72,000 that Dan was suggesting. And then call it 500,000 reduction in capital, $71,000 reduction in libraries. Marie, you had a view that I see in front of us. I didn't get a chance to see anything that was sent emails, so. if
I
you've got
didn't
something-
have time, I'm sorry.
That's
why I
fine, I
printed
would
it
have seen it
out.
anyways. But you've
Yeah.
got something here in front of us.
Yeah,
Can you take us through your thoughts, maybe?
Yeah, this is, obviously, I would prefer not to have to cut things that are good all around, but the 6% increase is way too. So I just looked through, and for the New Hartford schools, I tried to come up with, I said 100,000 in cuts, but I tried to come up with cuts that wouldn't affect the children directly. Because I think that's really important to try to maintain the ratio with the kids and, just the contact with teachers. So this is what I could come up with, as you can see. There's nothing there that, just suggestions. Regional 7, I just don't know the budget well enough to be able to say cut this much. They made a very compelling case with NIAS coming up that they need to up their AP courses and so forth, so I didn't want to go there. And then the town government, pretty much what Jim said, the town clerk's assistant is leaving, will hire somebody at a lower rate. The assessor's office assistant, by the way, is just on paper because she doesn't work there 50% of the time, so she shouldn't be appearing under the assessor's budget. It's inflating the appearance of what's there.
Pardon me, but if she's somewhere else,
Yes.
how can you subtract her salary?
Well, she should come under zoning. She's working 50% for zoning. Zoning should be
My
charged for that.
understanding though, what you're saying is you're removing 15,000.
Yes, I am, yeah.
But are you removing it completely or are you shifting it to another line item?
No, I'm removing it because you take it away from the assessors and you look at the zoning department and there's been additions of, the engineer.
So you're saying it should appear, that cost should appear on the zone?
Yes, exactly, it should be made up there. The ambulance association, you know, I come back to the fact that we're still paying a higher rate than is the actual cost per call. It's an uncomfortable thing to say to them, but hey, we don't pay anybody else any inflated, number for services.
It's not billed on a price per call, it's billed on a per capita basis
Per
by
capita,
the
excuse
towns.
me, thank you, per capita, but as I remember, it's still higher than what the actual cost is, so I took that off, and then EDC, obviously, you know, I'd like them to make do with 8,000 with the idea that if they have something specific, they can come back, and, you know, anything to do with EDC would be happy to fund, but right now, they have more than they really need, and, you know, and then the Torrington water hydrants, we're not paying the hydrants for Pine Meadow and the New Hartford, but we are paying for Torrington water hydrants, so we either pay for everybody or we don't pay for any, and I see a $14,000 savings there.
That again, we've discussed 18 times at this table. That is a prearranged deal that was done 5-6 years ago by a former first selectman to get water to that Mitchell site in Harwinton under an agreement where Home Depot pays some of it, the South End pays some of it, and the town pays some of it. And that was long mutually agreed to by the parties years ago. Anything different would go back on the deal.
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to cut it.
And there's-
without having.
And there's revenue from the personal property to come in to offset it. I mean, that's the other side of the coin, is that it's really not an expenditure because they're paying tax. So,
Any other comments or questions about Maria's proposal?
And a question on the school bonding for Antonini. So are we essentially saying we're moving the 500, or the windows and doors project to the bond, right, for next year? I understand there's also the roof, we talked about the roof.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess
that's in year 3 of their capital plan.
Okay, so would we bond the whole?
Right.
But we would leave it up to the building committee to determine which project should be floated with the bond, and which should fall
They
out
would
of
come
that.
back with a
Okay.
proposal that
Right.
theoretically would reflect the both.
Gotcha, okay.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And this has been repeated since March or April from the Board of Selectmen,
Right.
that we're not gonna have a building committee established until we get into close proximity of that payoff of the Bakerville note, because the whole thing is, if you have an expiring bond payment, you can do it at negligible increase to the taxpayer. So all you need is a little patience. We have 3 local schools, 2 of them have bonds on. So we've been doing work on the schools, we've been maintaining them, they are in nice shape, but at some point you have to have a little patience, rather than just adding, in this
Right.
type of economy, another payment. So,
I think that, to me, that makes sounds like, you know, an equitable solution. You know, I'm comfortable, I think, with, in terms of the New Hartford education budget, that, you know, the 1.9% seems to be equitable in terms of a reduction with Region 7. You know, without 152,000, I think, you know, I'm not sure without, you know, what effects that would have. You know, how comfortable I am with that. I think we can understand where the cuts would come from the New Hartford education, 72,000. I don't know what impact that would have on students, having kids in school myself. You know, but I certainly think we need to make some sort of reduction.
Okay, I'd like to hear from the rest of the group. Dan, Reggie, just everybody.
I agree with moving the Anthony windows and doors and including the road project into a building committee discussion. I agree that should be bonded and somewhat funded out of surplus in some manner. I mean, we have plenty of time. We're probably a year and a half, 2 years to put that whole discussion together and still try and get it into some time frame that is somewhat reasonable for the Board of Education. I do think we should walk away this evening with some type of an approved motion to request politely this year that Region 7 reduce their budget significantly, because I think it's a big hit. I understand that we have to pay for 19 or 20 new students, but it seems that budget gets away with significantly higher increases every year. And then Noel and Jim Jeremy, or Rob Jeremy are doing the best they can. But it's a tough road, but the economy's still pretty much in the doldrums, as far as I'm concerned. The local budget, I think there's probably some room for cuts there. While I respect Maria's document, I don't like seeing it written out almost as if it's a directive from this group, not you, but if you were to accept this, to tell you guys where to cut your money.
Just
have control of your
suggestions.
budget. Even like I mentioned before, with moving the computers to capital, I think it's a good idea, but that's something I'd like to see you guys come back, hopefully embrace that capital, or your operating line item for the computer moving capital, because I think again, it is a long-term benefit for you, because you don't have to be in a rush. And you can also gain possibly some price incentives by taking your time and shopping around. Some of the other capital items, maybe I'll postpone. I'd like to see some of the things with the recreation budget cut. I'd like to see some of their capital things cut back. I mentioned on Saturday, while they are doing a lot of self-funding through the wash account for Brody, in my opinion, has been, at least in the past, requested that they do more to be self-sufficient.
Dan, do you have any observation you want to share?
Well, obviously 6.5% is not gonna do it, and Region 7 is gonna cut $600,000 out of their budget. So we've gotta deal with the reality. And so where does that put us? I think we need to be sub 3, closer to the 2.5, that's where I'd like to be. How we get there, I think Dan's made some very good suggestions. And I think we need to be careful, Rich, to respect with your opinion about how we pushing things off on capital, and I have to be sure that we're trying to keep the capital funded at a certain level every year, which we've kind of done. It's probably not $400,000 or $500,000, and not really adequate. We've been getting by with it. So, kind of like, that's where I'd like to be. How we get there is the question.
Okay. Joe, do you have anything to add? Comments?
Not too much to add to what I sent out there. Actually, I guess compared to Dan's, I guess I had some more cuts and less reallocation of surplus funds.
Can you go through it, what you sent out, because I didn't, my computer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, in the local board, I had the increase cut in about half, which is larger than some of the other proposals, and I think it's similar to what you had. Region 7, I had
Hang
cut.
on a second, what did you have for local?
I think about half their increase.
224, so 112.
Yeah, something like that. Region 7, I just assumed that they were going to go ahead with the reduction they talked about doing Saturday. I think it was around 40,000, 43,000 or something. Town government, I had a small cut, 20,000. Capital expenditures, I agreed with about everybody else that we needed to move, especially the big $530,000 project to either financing or something, or defer it somehow. And in each case, I just kind of left it up to each, there were no allocations, it was just left up to the bottom line.
My views, just to cover everybody here, is, I just don't see where we can, it seems to me we've got to use the number that we've got for Region 7. We can say we'd like to see it something different, but just to go in front of the hearing, and then show what I would call a real number, only because that's the number that's been given to us. Maybe sending people a message that's not, they're gonna see a number that's what they're gonna walk away with, and they're gonna forget about the rest of the words that went with it, and that's not necessarily reality. I don't have any problem with the cuts that I've heard in general. I think we need to get it under 3%. I'd like to get it under 3% and hear what the public hearing has to say. If we can get the public there without the emotion or special interest. Cut the library, and you're going to hear about the library portion of the budget. Okay, that's what you're going to hear. So you have to have already made your mind up before that, which may be the reality anyway. We have to make up our mind before we go in there. What I've seen so far, the town has been flat for at least a couple of years. And while you can argue about any of the cuts that are there, some of Maria's, I think, is moving it around one tax base to another. But you can argue about any of the cuts. I think the town has done a stellar job of controlling its costs. I would support the town's spending budget. However, the town's capital budget is getting up there, and I think we got to go after it. I'm not crazy about funding trucks over 3 years. Okay, I think we absolutely shouldn't do it, but I would cut the capital for the town, and I think we need to do the bond project as well. I would, for one, would support whatever timing that the bond is ready, because I think we can do it budget neutral if we let me put this way, do it tax neutral. Okay, it might take a little bit of surplus to do it, or it might take moving something from capital to a bond payment. But I think we can kind of do it neutral once we know that people are ready. You've got one school that's at 2%. Okay, I don't know how you ask Region 7 to go to 0 and leave 2% in the local education budget where you had a 0% contracted wage increase.
It's easy.
To me, it's hard to justify.
You just asked.
Okay. Overall, what I would support personally bringing into the hearing is what Dan has shown in option 1, and I've seen his formula, but I've heard the numbers before, so I'm familiar with it. But I would support doing exactly what Dan has suggested. That's where I would go with it.
See what the public thinks about the budget.
If you were to go in that path, if you would agree on the 3 line item changes in revenue that I discussed, which would include increasing the prior year taxes to $175,000, increasing the fees and fines to $100,000, and reducing the town clerk revenue from $110,000 to $90,000. The net impact on the mill rate is 2.74%. For the entire package. Of course, if there were further cuts that I had advertised to you at roughly 2.45 by flatlining capital, I think you could probably say that you're in the 2.3 range by flatlining without hearing from your public. And you have the opportunity, as I said, we will meet again. But I think that we're all certain of one thing. We've got to get out of the 6s and the 5s and the 4s and get into workable numbers that our constituents think, are more realistic.
1 to 1.5, I think is realistic. That's my number.
Would you consider Oh, excuse me, Virginia.
Okay.
Would you consider just inching up the collection rate maybe to, we're at 97.5 and, it continues to be higher than that, would you, 98? I don't know how much difference that would be in money, but.
Possibly, but in my mind, we're doing that by drawing down the surplus. We're doing essentially the same thing.
Your tax collector right now projects 97.3.
For the year end.
You're at 97.5.
I'm
I would not
concerned
recommend that
about-
change.
I've been harping on raising that for the last 2 years, but seeing
I think
what
that's
the tax
conservative.
collector is collecting, I'm a little concerned about that too, that we might err on the side of caution this year because of some of the election issues.
I wouldn't do that and take some money out of surplus, because what's gonna happen, as you inch it up, the money that's going into surplus funds.
I just feel we're asking too many cuts from the local schools, and that might be one way to reach the number that you want without asking them to make as much of cuts as it seemed to be on the table.
But just remember, as time goes on, we get closer and closer to centering, what the correct collection number should be.
I wanted to plant that seed.
I agree with you.
But I just want to point out an
Time is for
inconsistency
advance,
here. The option being considered is a reduction of 70,000. You advocated for a $100,000 cut to a local school. Isn't that what your budget says right here? Cut 100,000?
I came in with absolutely the top dollars that.
But it's just an inconsistency. You just said
Now
that this was
as-
taking too much. You advocated for more.
Now, as the discussion flows, okay, I'm looking at, maybe we could bring in just a little bit more money from and we try to smooth it out a little more. That's all, I mean, mine is the extreme as far as I'm concerned.
We're within 0.7% of actual, in terms of collection rate. And we bumped up the fees and fines, and we put an extra $150,000 into revenue. I would do that next year with the fine revenue for what we did, if there's still room to do it. And then after that, there is no revenue for the prior years to plug back in. You're right there, and the only thing you can really do is take off. It's never really been higher than that. It's just too close to.
It's cutting it close is one thing, but cutting it close and remaining in the black is the mandate. The day that we cut it so close that we're actually gone too far is the uncomfortable meeting when we have to go back or make mid-year adjustments. But it's hard to talk down to the end of the wire with a way a lot of our budgets go. We certainly don't want to have that uncomfortable meeting where we didn't meet revenues to the point where we have to have a supplemental meeting.
But that's one of the first places in my mind was, what about the collection rate? And we've done, it wasn't maybe 2 years ago, we were at 96.5. So we've been pretty aggressive. We moved it down in some pretty rough times. We moved it up pretty aggressively.
We actually dropped it to 96 2 years ago,
96,
and we brought it right back up to 97.5
2 years.
last year, and now we're flat.
We brought it up over 2 years, didn't we? Whatever, that's pretty.
It's all in the audit. Bill has the audit. I have a question, Board of Education. Your capital for 2012-13 is $526,000. Is that for the windows and doors project only?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to cut the education capital request of $526,000 for the Anthony windows and doors. Eliminate, remove.
Period. That's the
I'd like to
motion.
remove $526,000 for the education capital windows and doors.
Any other capital? Also, you're gonna do any other capital? Any capital?
No, I think the $526,000 is just only for the windows and doors, is that correct?
But if you replace it with your year two, you need to reduce it from 526 to roughly $140,000. when they switch, so they get some construction work done this year that would not be included in the bonding rights. That was what was implied by my option, if that's what the will of the board was.
Was that your intent to do it? To bring in the
I'm lost now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think he was saying leave 140 in, so they can start
Next year.
Their year 2 plan, you'd effectively switch, they'd get their second year priorities in year 1, and then we'd shift years 2 and 3 into year 2 with a bonded project.
So I would like to know, if you take the 526 out, I would like to know what the number is that they need to get some stuff done in this next fiscal year. What's the number?
I have them in 140,000, the actual number in their capital project plan was 139, and it was an uneven number, I can't remember, but I just rounded it to 140,000.
If you look at Dan's note 2,
After we'll do the motion, we'll start with the-
All right, just want me to just take this out? Okay, fine, that's fine.
if you look at Dan's note 2, it pretty well covers what I think you're trying to get at. It doesn't say what the $140,000 does. It includes the exchange of year 1 and year 2 capital plans.
Could you just read what year 2 was? I'm sorry, I don't find the paper that had that.
It's in the capital,
Here, I have it.
Oh, here it is.
so yeah, for year 2 was 139,399.
So it was,
And it was air handling, carpet, and library shelves furniture, which has been on the table for a long time.
right.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be sure the library is gonna be in there at some point.
To me, I don't see how we can cut capital out, take care of that stuff.
Yeah.
$40,000 is not unreasonable category of things.
So I would just reduce it down to 140.
The actual number as presented in their year 2 was $139,399, sorry for the wait, which would include replacement of air handlers, carpeting within the library, and library shelves and furniture. I believe if I'm reading it correctly. $80,000 for the air handlers was the most expensive issue.
But I would not be opposed to reducing it to 175, which would include the 35,000 for computers if they, as a board, decide to move it from operating to capital. Keep it like that.
I think you find support from our board to do so. That's the will of this board, what we used to do, so. I think it kind of more fits the definition of capital than it does really operational.
And then you'd be in sync with your
But I'll make a motion then to, for the 2012, 2015 budget for the Board of Education capital, set the number at $175,000.
That's second.
You gonna make the other with the change part of that motion? I think you should.
Yeah, I think it is, it's dependent upon them agreeing to move it, the computers from operating to capital, that's what I would vote for.
I make that part of the motion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise it would stay, you would for it.
The budget for the 2012, 2015 year capital set a number at $175,000,
Forget you said.
dependent upon moving the computers
From,
from their operating budget to capital. And we'll just go to parentheses, after computers, $35,000, that's correct, it's 35?
$35,000, yeah.
Yeah, let's make sure we have the right line item. It's technology.
technology equipment.
and then technology was,
Is there also the grant money on top of that, 35 plus the 45, or is that including?
For our purposes, in the overall,
Let me clarify the motion reads, motion by Reggie for the 2012-2013 Board of Education, this is put local board of education. Local Board of Education capital set the number at $175,000, dependent upon BOE moving the computers, $35,000 technology line item from operating budget to capital.
What if that account was this one?
sorry,
The account number.
so.
I still
Oh,
can't.
What
sorry.
account number is that?
What house number?
Page.
What page?
Yeah.
Page 18
Technical equipment, is what we're talking about here?
Okay.
22,
Yeah,
30,
you
7,
just
30.
couldn't pull it quick.
I'll read it.
Yeah, why don't you read that one more time, and then we'll get a second motion.
We got Jim seconded.
So the line item is 730, and we, exact wording is technical equipment. So, technology, or change technology to technical equipment.
the technical change from the technical equipment would mean that in our budget, the education
Line item, line item
the
730.
line item on page 6
Exactly.
would show 1.53% increase with 117,629. That's out of our control.
Our line item? We say the resulting, yeah, okay,
The
just.
transfer, it's neutral to us, but technically, on page 6 of your budget, we've increased them to 175,000 capital, we decreased them in our budget to $7,826,191. It's roughly a 1.53 instead of the previously discussed 1.98.
If we
That's
agree those other cuts, we could.
that's exactly.
Okay, when you're ready, why don't you read it?
The motion reads, Reggie and hopefully Jim will second, for the 2012-2013 local Board of Education capital, set the number at $175,000, dependent upon the Board of Education moving the computers, 35,000, technical equipment line item 730 from operating budget to capital.
Okay, any more discussion on that before we vote?
Yeah, I'd like to ask if that, it has 35,000 plus the projected REAP grant of 23,000.
But that's relevant.
Well, I'm looking at the bottom line here. The town is putting in 35,000, but then a grant bumps that up.
What I heard in the motion,
Yes.
that REAP money stays right where it is,
So that will go toward technology anyway,
whatever you wanna do with it.
where it is
Computers
now,
fit.
yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, right. So I understand how much is actually going
It's really 55,000.
toward computer, yes,
It
exactly,
shows it's 35.
yeah.
Any other comments or questions before we vote? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Opposed, and no abstentions. Okay. One done. May I suggest we finish the Board of Education, or, well, whatever, suggested to go to one other areas. We're partway into that now, with that $35,000 change.
Again, the 194 comes out to, or 198, sorry, comes out to 145.
What you currently look at now is a 224,031 increase in education local ed at 2.91. If you were to do the previous, my recommendation plus your change, that would change to $7,826 $117,630. With me? 1.53% increase. Still at 2.74% if the other changes were adopted.
So it's a 274 now, we just removed the 35.
It's not there yet. You got more work to do.
So if
Again,
you
two
wanted-
other adjustments have to be made to get to 2.74.
So if you wanted to finish off the school the way Dan had profiled it, you would ask for an additional $72,000 cut from what we just discussed. Right?
A motion to limit the rate of growth to 1.53%. Local ed to do it.
Was that capital or the actual?
General operations.
Is it 2%?
The initial was
Hasn't been
2%,
reported.
right? They're gonna give it out, yes.
Correct, but you've moved 35 out of operations into capital. You're really not cutting them.
Correct, right.
You're just transferring from one line item to the other. It's an account
I just want to
change.
make a point of clarification, so if they do move to 35, then my reduction is not 124, it's 89,131.
Okay.
And I think on that rec department, I just want to raise that point again because we brought up Saturday about this whole thing being seasonal.
Can we finish education?
I didn't know we were working on one single budget. I thought we
I'd
just-
certainly like to finish education. We're so close to it.
I think that's what we,
My recommendation is that I would go with what Dan had suggested, which is 1.98% minus the 35. So in order to do that, if you were to take that recommendation, you would cut an additional $72,000 from the Board of Education spending. For a total of minus 107 between that and the expense item we just moved to capital.
seeing that we asked them to make this kind of money, it'll probably mean layoffs or whatever, and then we have to look back and possibly look at the effect on unemployment, their unemployment insurance costs and whatnot, so. I don't know what the exact number would be, because they haven't reviewed it yet. I think I'll question somewhere more like
What if we took Dan's number at 70, was it 2? And
71
reduced that by the
change.
35, and have them go back for cuts for the difference?
I think we already reduced it by 35 minutes.
Well, no, whatever the 72 was, all right, yeah, we did, but it was, before we did the 35, we were saying, I think it was 70, was it 72? Is that your?
No, around
71 and change.
71. So let's say they come back, another 35,000 in cuts, rather than an additional 72. In line with what you were thinking.
You're not at the 2.74 that you said.
Right.
You're inching it, that's significant.
Fractionally, right. Well, it's fine.
And everything counts. It's the board's pleasure.
Make a motion to cut the local capital of the local Board of Education budget by $55,000. We're down to $55,000 increase.
Down to increase. So 224 is what it was.
That's a lot more than
Yeah, that's
we're
more than
talking
we've
about.
been talking about.
I think we'll go too far. I wouldn't go any farther than the 72. Yeah, what we've already done, personally.
Well,
There was a
what's
71,000
that
run
mean?
plus the 35, right?
I had a 72, but whatever.
Yeah.
78.
If you're gonna limit their increase to 52, that's gonna be 0.5% increase.
Reduce the increase, so
Reduce it.
1.53 or.
Reduce it by
One point.
$25,000.
If you're talking about going to the 1.98 and transferring 35,000, you're at 1.53% growth. The increase in dollars is $117,630 in operations, for a total number of $7.826191 million, which effectively keeps it to the 2.74% overall tax increase if other items are implemented. So, if you wanted to go farther, were you trying to create an equivalent level at the 1.98 similar to Region 7, or did you want to go farther?
No, that's what you just said.
Okay.
So you're saying it should be,
Yeah.
you're suggesting an increase
Of
in their budget or
1.53%.
additional-
In
that's
total,
100
it's one point,
$117,000.
in total, it's 1.98. You're just transferring 35,000 from operations to capital. They're still getting that money. Because you gave them 140 for the year 2 capital plan plus another 35,000. That's just a line item change. You're just accounting for it
What would
differently.
their total budget be?
$7,826,191, or $117,630 over last year in operations, plus $175,000 in capital, which is a $90,000 increase over last year, right, from 85,000. All right.
Yeah, I got the same as you. That's the new budget, the new request for 2012-13, 7.81.
You want to just get rid of
I got a 191 round.
Yeah, that's an increase of 117,630, and that's
So motion should be to approve the local board of education budget at
$826,191.
I'm at $7,826,000. Gotcha.
Here, that's all we need to say.
Let me just make sure I got the number right, $7,826,191.
Does that bring you to the 1.98%?
Yes, so you're basically,
Yeah.
basically
Overall.
$117,000 and change.
But it includes a $35,000 line item
Okay.
accounting change.
All right, it's at 1.98.
$7,826,191.
630.
And it's a 1.53% increase.
Very simple motion. Motion to approve the local board of education budget at $7,826,191.
Second for that? Any more discussion?
The only thing I'd like to see as far as coming back from the Board of Education, I want to know, obviously, what the net effect that's going to be. The other one's going to want to know that, but if there are layoffs, what kind of employment impact and other impacts that's going to be. So you're good for no impact, so I have no doubt that that's not.
So typically what I have done is when we have cut a position, I have to add money in unemployment, so you gotta go beyond the number.
That's why he's asking.
So,
I know that's probably coming, and not a reason to expect that it asks for those kinds of cuts, word to be layoffs, and then it's not gonna come out of thin air.
Any more discussion before we vote? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Abstained? Local schools not. Town budget. We'll start with the capital.
That's good, sir.
suggest that we go with reducing it by $40,000, by roughly $40,000 to a total of $270,000.
What's the zoning POCD again? Is that their local
Plan of conservation and development.
That's something you have to do every 10 years or whatever?
Right.
And that's just to throw money in, or when do they have to do that?
In 3 years.
In 3 years, okay.
That would probably be something that's likely to consider to put them up.
So I went with the $113,000 cut. I took out the $20,000 for the zoning, $53,000 for the plow, $30,000 on park and rec capital, $10,000 on the downtown improvements. I think I'm up with $113,000.
So we've got a $40,000 number on the table, we've got a $113,000 number cut on the table. What's the board inclined to do? If we went with a 40, we would be approximately where we were last year. If we went to the 100, that's whatever, $70,000 more than the prior year.
Dan, what's included in that line, park and rec capital? Line says remaining. What are the items that are included in that?
We have $5,000 for Callahan Park improvements, $5,000 for trail upgrades, $5,000 for Berkshire Hall and Brody House work, including a study on the feasibility of converting the Brody House into a public building. Continued improvements on the field house, and for $20,000, and Antolini field improvements to resolve the football debate for $25,000.
I think we should stay right where they are and cost us nothing. I'm gonna make a motion to remove that total $60,000 from the federal government capital budget for parks and recreation capital remaining.
Remove it specifically from Parks and Recreation?
I'm gonna remove it from the line item in the capital expenditure budget, in the park and recreation capital, that we need to fix up at 79. Eliminate that number.
So you're taking the 60 out.
Reggie, is that because you don't see any cuts being possible in the operational side?
Well, I think that in this economy, in this situation, that last year we spent a lot on recreation. I think this year we can postpone those things. I mean,
Okay, I didn't know if you were trying to.
Richard, did you make a motion?
I did make a motion to eliminate that line.
Can we get a second before we discuss it? We have a motion, do we have a second for the motion?
A second.
Okay.
I would advocate against the cut. I think that we have very few issues that confront us as a town. The space issue for the football is something I hear too much about. I think we could solve it in a proactive fashion by getting in front of it. The parks are a valued asset to the town, and I think you have to give them something.
So is that 60 then, was that earmarked for Brody South or something for football, or what was it for?
No, well, I just read it off. Callahan Park, trail upgrades for any number of the trails that we have in town, Berkshire Hall, remodeling and paint, plus a architectural review of the Brody House, which is currently rented, but the selection don't see going forward being rented in terms of a residential rental. Field house, we have the 6,400 square foot gym that we've been making strides on bringing back from the abyss. And then the Antolini field house improvements, which the selectmen are promoting as a solution to the problem of the space issue for youth sports.
In my mind, unless we feel very strongly about a specific item, we should vote this motion down, put another motion on the table if you want to cut $60,000 from capital, and say cut $60,000 from capital, and leave it up to the Board of Selectmen's discretion to figure out where capital comes from. That's more along the lines of what I would do, unless you really feel strongly. You're zeroing on some very specific things that, you know, really live in the background of it like these guys do.
As a board, I can tell you, currently, in the years that I've been on, we haven't ever done that. It's not to say that we can't do that, but we kind of, you can give that discretion to the board, so I would be inclined to just vote on that, to not vote on that, because of that reason, to not have an objection to it.
I just, when I look at this capital budget, I think a town truck that would take care of the roads and help with the health and safety and welfare of the community, at least in my mind, has a lot higher precedence than anything right now. Parks and Recreation, considering the economic situation that we're still under.
Yeah, but we could talk about it, I mean, you know, you can talk about, you know, pros and cons, but again, you know, I would definitely prefer to discussion to talk about that background as to what's appropriate if we made a cut.
And
That's all I'm saying.
all I would add is my last statement is, in a bad economy, what do people do? They stay closer to home, they use the parks more now.
I just
They
wish
stay at home.
we probably all have opinions about where the cuts should be made. And, or we do what we want, we're a motion on the table, we need to vote on it. But I wouldn't accept that motion. I would change it, I would make, vote down or withdraw it or whatever. I would do a motion that says cut 60, that's the number, cut 60,000 out of town capital and leave it up to them.
I will remove my motion further back in the proceeding.
I would agree with that.
There was a second on it.
I only seconded to get the discussion.
Now, anybody like to make a new motion and get badgered?
He removed the second.
Yeah. Anybody like to replace it with a different motion?
Open your mouth once you start.
You know, probably because you want to cut a little more than I did, so.
No, I'm the only one making motions.
I'm kind of comfortable
Once you start.
with the motion to cut $40,000.
I'm sorry?
I'd like $40,000.
40,000?
I'd like to set the capital for the town at $200,000. Or is that at $175,000?
Is that
Is that a motion?
I just made them.
Dan made a motion to cut 40,000
Oh,
from
you
the
did the
capital.
motion? Sorry.
$40,000.
From capital.
Do we have a second to his motion?
I'll second it.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, Jim, you know, about what you're thinking, but it's, you know, it's
It's-
infrastructure,
it's
it's
more-
where it goes all the time.
I
That's
hear
why
you,
want
I
to
understand
get
it's
it
more
cut.
than last year.
Yeah. And last year.
As is
wasn't enough.
175.
I mean,
Board of
total.
Ed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it wasn't enough last year.
That's not saying that much, though. Capital last year was 85.
No, the thing is, you know, here's, are we going to discussion?
Discussion.
So, Dan, I mean, I understand what you're saying and everything, but, you know, I mean, as a Board of Finance, I mean, we're asked to sit here and, you know, try and come up with numbers that are workable for the town, okay? The Board of Ed is doing what they have to do, and Region 7 is doing what they have to do as well. And, you know, if we wanna, you know, partake in their business, then we should join their boards with that, as far as I'm concerned, but we're the Board of Finance, and that's how I have to look at it, okay? I like to go through this and not focus and zero in on line items, such as the Board of Ed and the Region 7. But they've done nothing up there in Region 7, in my opinion, to really make an attempt to reduce, and I think that message needs to be sent to them. I think the local Board of Ed, they hear our message, they're here, they're participating, and they take a beating all the time as well. I think the town is taking a beating, we're looking at areas to try and optimize, and yeah, there are probably some other areas. So when we all come up with these suggestions, yeah, I know nobody wants to get hit or badgered, but if we didn't come up with suggestions, then we're just gonna do this and then bring it to the polls and, you know, throw it up in the air. I think it's unfortunate that Region 7, the regional districts, have an unfair advantage. And the unfair advantage is that they can do what they want and throw it up and either vote at the district or go to referendum without having to face a regional Board of Finance that could say, you know, yea or nay. tell you, if they had that, then there would probably be you know, somewhat of a change in the approach up there. But, you know, the towns are told to suck it up and buck up, your number's up. I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
What actually we have to go through?
Well,
we stick
we have a motion on the table.
Yeah, no, I am, but when I'm trying, let me build my story, okay? So when you look at the
Quickly,
bottom,
Counselor.
when you look at the bottom line, I wanted to be out here at 8 o'clock. When you look at the bottom line, 375,000 for the capital is not bad. It's not bad at all.
This is a region.
Pardon me?
This is a region setback.
But when you think about it, yeah, then into the bottom
Where
line,
does
that's not
where
bad
does
at
this
all.
align with the $40,000 cut line with the $270,000 capital budget that you were just talking about?
What was the question again?
Am I lost again?
I didn't
No, I
understand.
thought you said.
My recommendation was to approve a $40,000 cut, to get us to 2.7.
Which gets us down to
275 under.
Now I get the big picture.
I can find the extra 500.
Pardon me, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you guys sleep, so I should get the night one.
I just think, Jim, that, you know, and we're not talking, you know, I think we do know, but we're all on the same page with that. We're talking about capital, though. In terms of capital, I don't think, you know, we only throw good money, you know, we're not throwing good money after that.
I agree with you, and what we're doing here, we're doing because this is what they hope we do every single year up on the hill. It's a fact of life.
I know, but, you know, what are you gonna do? I don't know if you notice the spike in your face.
Pardon me?
You're gonna bite off your nose to spite your face. You
No,
know, because
but
that's really what you know. Well, absolutely, I mean, we haven't gotten there yet.
Any
We're on
other
the capital right now.
comments or questions on the capital?
Why can't we get by with just 200,000? If you pull the 20 and the 53 out, because that 20 is really not necessary for the next, 1 or 2 years. The 53, you're gonna have to do that over 3 years. If you move that out, or maybe if you do that with, whatever other projects you're gonna buy. I don't know.
Drainage, you're doubling up on what we currently spend for drainage.
Well, because it's here and it's also in the operating, is what you're saying.
Right, it's always been again. Any other comments before we vote? So, can you read the motion again?
Just cut $40,000 in the capital budget.
General government.
General government.
General government capital budget.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. With no other comments? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
1, 2, opposed? Okay, the ayes have it.
Another one. Another one.
Jim, would you make a motion based on what your knowledge is of the Region 7 budget at this time to ask a reduction?
Ask for it.
I demand last year, let me get us in here, so. Okay.
Can we move on to, I'm going to suggest town government expenditures. Any suggested changes there? We'll take some from Jim, some from Maria. I wouldn't touch it. I would do something with the revenue, as we talked about. I personally wouldn't touch the expenditures.
I went through a few, but the one that I would like to see addressed is Parks and Recreation. I'd like to see that number reduced by $17,782. Since it's seasonal.
We're talking about a budget that's only, the request is only $667,446.43 increase. And you're saying $17,000 decrease?
This is one we discussed Saturday, this is a
So that
seasonal,
would lower the,
it's seasonal.
that would lower the budget roughly $50,000 increase total.
To what?
If
Yeah.
you, 67,970, you use 50, that's not a,
That's what I would be pulling out, 17.7.
is that a motion?
Oh, we're talking about it, it's a suggestion.
wouldn't touch the numbers, which,
Huh?
I wouldn't touch the council because there's something there. And just to point out recreation, it's up $2,000. I understand your point about part-time versus full-time.
Let's just do it, we got that area well spread, but it's not being addressed. Tough times call for tough decisions. It's reality.
Okay, I'm hearing some discussion, but I'm not hearing any motions. We'll give it one more pass around to see if there's any motions. If not, I'm gonna move on to revenue. So. That's here.
You said no second resolution.
Well, move on to something else unless somebody's got a motion to make with discussion here. Point.
Just, maybe adding some money to the revenue side.
Sorry?
Changing some of the revenue numbers that we have. This is like, kind of consider that, right? Prior year tax.
I made one change in my recommendation, but that was the revenue from fund balance. I think you have it in your year-end summary that we provided at your last meeting that basically said the $144,000 that we took out in this budget, we don't anticipate using.
Plus another $1,300,000, well over $400,000 total. So it's available that wasn't used, correct? $300,000 number and $100,000.
Auditor says we're at 14.1%. Forgot the words that we're going to use. It's not undesignated, unclassified reserve fund.
Unassigned.
There were two revenue streams around $400,000 that was unused. We went back and said we would fund that.
We've got the room to put 300,000 in there if we want to. Pretty comfortable. I'm not going to radically change that. I'll bring it down by a percent.
In the last 2 years' budgets, we've made two initiatives to include fund balance in our budget. This year, $145,000. It turns out it doesn't look like we're gonna use it, so it will stay. Last year, I think we put in excess of $300,000. And we did not use it. We had a large,
So you're looking to bump the surplus up from the request, which is $144,979 to a total of $300,000?
but don't forget, we're not, no, I'm just asking to put it from $144,979 to $300,000. Don't forget, in that prior year, in the 10-11 budget, we had that 96% collection rate, and that's what offset the $355. And we've adjusted for that now.
Is there any other additions to the revenue sheet other than that?
Yes, there are.
Can you
There
list
would
them
be,
all out?
there would be 4 changes in total from our prior discussion. I think the motion should include changing the prior year tax allocation to an estimate of $175,000, fees and fines to $100,000, town clerk fees to $90,000, and fund balance under the surplus line item of $300,000.
We never addressed the
As well as removing the $125,000 in state reimbursement associated with the windows and doors. So actually, 5 line items.
Approve the revenue sheet as discussed.
Okay, I'd like to get the specifics of good.
I think she was done most. Why don't you start at the top?
There's a second to that motion?
Any clarification? Okay. Prior taxes,
Wait a minute, need a second.
Yeah, Bill, second.
Bill, I'm sorry.
prior taxes to $175,000.
Are you calling them prior taxes or tax allocation?
Prior taxes. Fees and fines,
$100,000.
$100,000.
town clerk 90,000, fund balance under surplus line item 300,000.
And removal or state reimbursement to $0.
$0.
It's at 125 right now, you're reducing it to 0.
So changing prior taxes to 175,000, fees and fines to 100,000, town clerk to 90,000, fund balance under surplus line item 300,000, and removal of for state reimbursement to $0.
Correct.
Approved revenue sheet. Want it after as discussed? Just take down this and move it down.
Any discussion on that?
Okay.
If you make the surplus 300,000, are you kind of tying yourself to doing that every year at this point, or what will be different next year that, you know?
To me, there's a couple things.
Yeah.
It helps ease us into the 8% that we're looking at, whatever it is now from Region 7. So you put some into this year, some into next year. We do have the option, if we see a hole, can't live with it, to do what we were talking about this year, is bump up collections a 0.25% or 0.5%. Every little bit you get at it is something. We talked about the surplus, what do we do with it? We should do something that puts it in front of the voters. This is taking a chunk of it, I think a responsible chunk of it, and covering some things in a difficult year. And maybe we'll have some more grand list growth, but I don't know. But to me, it's a responsible way to kind of start chiseling it down.
So you're kind of
Every time you do that,
hoping
you're
more,
exactly right. You risk having a hole.
You're really hoping that you're not gonna get the repeat of the proration shift of Region 7, and that's what you're covering.
I'll also say we're doing it in a year where we've got what I consider to be pretty healthy capital. Which is, you could dial capital down next year if we didn't have it. Any other comments or questions before we go?
I mean, I understand what you're discussing, to the surplus, but I'm just not, I'm not in agreement with taking the taxpayers' money that they didn't approve and applying it towards the budget, because you just don't.
They will.
No, yeah, but they're not approving this, we're doing this. If they wanted to approve it, they would have done it at the polls, they would have said, okay, add this money in.
They will approve this change at the poll, but when the entire
So
budget.
when we go to the polls, we're gonna tell them that we took their surplus and we added it into the budget.
You're not stand up the budget hearing and say
We're
what
gonna have to
happened.
do it because we gotta stop doing this. I think we need to come up with a number also that we're willing to agree on, that it's going to be what that surplus number should be, what percentage, is it 11 or 12%? Because it continues to go up and up and up, and I think we need to get that under control as well.
This is starting to knock it down, Jim. We're heading
Yeah, no,
down.
I know that, but what are we gonna set that number at? This is knocking it down, but are we still gonna go back to 14%? I don't know.
I would suggest we pick this discussion up after we've got our bond rating.
No, I don't think so, I think we need to
Get
address
the
it.
money, I know, but get the money for the bonds and then consider. It's important if you have your surplus at a certain level, so when Moody's or whoever comes and looks at the bond rating, you can get it a favorable rate.
Plus the surplus is also an emergency. You wanna be in a position where if you have something come up.
Right, but the
you
problem
carry your
is
bond
if the
rating
surplus is there, it's cash to grab and to do this thing and that thing and everything else, and it's not the
Maybe if
right
it gets
way.
approved.
That's not how we're doing it. We're putting it, using it to fund the budget.
No, but if we keep building up the surplus and keeping it there with a high percentage, then we're gonna have that pot built back up in due time.
High percentage of
More in
collections.
it, Jim?
No, 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 surplus.
Are you proposing to put more in?
No, I'm just saying is that, the numbers have been all over the place. King came in and said, well, it should be, 14 or 16% to your budget. And we've been going on the premise that it should be anywhere between 11 and 12%. And I think that's really what we need to do. What percentage should we be at? Surplus to the budget. That's
What are you gonna do once you come up with that percentage?
You maintain that number.
How?
Just maintain
motion out?
You're gonna do it on an annual basis, then, probably.
By putting it in revenue? That's what we're doing. I don't know how else to do it.
I don't know, it's tough. I mean, then we must have some other numbers that we should be able to adjust, I would say.
You want me to do the motion?
Should I just look at cash in it? Leave it in, take it out.
The motion was, the motion by Reggie, seconded
Oops,
by,
wait a minute, sorry, just trying to make it bigger for you.
Reggie, seconded by Bill Gross, to approve the revenue sheet as discussed, changing line items, prior taxes to $175,000, fees and fines to $100,000, town clerk to $90,000, fund balance under surplus line item $300,000, remove state reimbursement to $0.
So let me ask one more question here, while you're on this, in still in discussion.
State reimbursement to $0.
Yes.
So Dan, are there any other surprises that you see from, you know, unplanned or anything that might happen or anything that's out there, you know, relative to the town at all? Anything out there that, you know, could be a surprise for us over the next fiscal year? Other than what's in the budget? I know you're smiling, but I'm just trying to get a feel.
You're asking me to predict the future.
Nothing's
And
gonna
I
happen.
don't know. I caution you, I will not say that nothing is gonna happen. Obviously, we always have things that happen. This year alone, we had 200-year storm events. We covered them. You know,
We have to worry
Irene,
about that vehicle that was stolen, is that?
it's been recovered.
Oh,
We have an ongoing investigation.
okay, so we don't have to pay for anything.
We have insurance.
Any other discussion before we vote?
I want to make my position known that I'm very uncomfortable with putting that money into the surplus, although I understand why you're doing it and it makes good sense. But I think the more we keep doing it, the more we're gonna get used to like floating a bigger budget that we really want to, because we look at a surplus as something that's available to us to offset that. So in that sense, I'm with Jim that I'd rather find another way to bring down that surplus number rather than to artificially carry budgets forward.
The only other way I know how to bring it down, I suppose there are two ways. You could give everybody a tax relief, okay?
That would be
In terms
nice.
of a tax rebate, I suppose.
Not
Kind of off the wall, I think, but you can do it that way. Or you spend it down on, let's call it special projects. Steel Road being an example, new bridge that's coming out, something like that.
I would just pay down debt. I mean, it may only be a little trickle, but at least you're putting it to something where you can say, we're looking, you know, to using it in a way, you know.
By the way, this is not uncommon to do what we're doing here.
Oh, I'm sure.
And we haven't been doing this, we haven't done a lot of this. I'm always very conscious about, you know, make ourselves a whole. It was easier to do it, justify it when the collection rate was going up, okay? Fix the hole. But now we're kind of running out.
Yeah.
Any other comments before we vote? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Abstained? 2 abstentions? Maria and Jim? So we talked about the town, we talked about the local school, we talked about revenues, and we have to deal with 7. We put it up for vote, nothing came across, we can go right back to it, see if there's any more discussion on it.
Just touch on these, I think we should just make a motion to request that our chairman send a letter to the Board of Education and ask them for them to reduce the budget.
No, I haven't. They have though. If I listen to the words that you said, they presented us at 2.5% of the budget.
but we can only move based on what they gave us and what we have right now officially. So that's all I'm looking for. If they
I think
reduce
what
it-
we got, I don't know if it's official, have you seen the 1.98, Dan?
I,
1.98% we got from the stuff?
no one just told me that the actual modification was roughly a little bit higher too. But I think that we're in, we understand that there's gonna be a change. Judy hasn't given me any correspondence yet, officially, from the meeting last night.
I don't think he's really gone on record with a motion issue at all. Asking him to give us the
No. But, yeah, I just wanted to follow through on this, so, well, was there,
motion, we can second. Sorry, did you even second?
we didn't have a motion yet.
I didn't.
What's the motion?
That the chairman sends a letter to regional number 7 to ask them to reduce their budget.
Further reduce the budget. Is by what?
Ask them to reduce the budget. If no one wants to second it, then I'll be happy to second the motion that you make, sir.
Okay. Anything else from you?
I'll just ask a question, so, well, your last Board of Ed meeting that you guys had out there, what was the bottom line increase in the whole district?
I just handed it to Dan, it's the only copy I have, so it was 2% budget, 2% increase. All right, and Dan, you got the numbers right in front of you, so the impact to New Hartford was, it's about a $45,000 reduction over the previous budget, that was submitted. I think if I got that correct. So that, reduces
The
the,
45,000?
it's 45, I'm doing it off the top of my head, it's about a $45,000 reduction and about a 0.52% reduction impact to, so you went from 8.03% down to, what is it, Dan, 7.51.
5-1.
Then when you went to the Board of Ed meeting, you and Dan both went there, what did you ask them to bring the budget down to? Or did you have a number that you gave them?
Specific number.
You did, okay.
We just said that generally our history has been, we accept the changes in ADM, perhaps reluctantly, but our board typically hasn't said, no, it's not accepting ADM.
So
You
you
gotta
didn't
change
have
it
a specific-
specifically because
We have to get a full
what
copy.
the budget that they're asking for was higher than I believe that people will support and can afford to support. When the reality is, there is a big hit to the ADM, and budget needs to be trimmed.
Right, you have 19 additional students at about 14,500 per student. Not 16,000, 14,500.
So that budget was voted on and approved in the meeting last night, you said?
Yes, that's what the board chair is gonna submit. And is there room to cut more? There's always a chance to do that, but to be honest with you, for Rob and I to be able to carry the motion to reduce the budget by numbers like Jim is quoting is just not gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. You're not gonna cut $300,000 out of the budget. Is there more room to knock it down some more, get it to 1.98 or somewhere? Yeah, I think that can be done. Okay, but
So, well, can I just ask you a question? Where do you get the assessment from at 13,000? What's that based on?
that's the, based on the ADM per, the ADM per pupil. So it's per pupil is $14,428.
So, how are you getting that end result? Because I was taking the total assessment of 16,747, 764.
But that,
We got 1,067 students.
And?
It's 15.9.
right, but don't forget, you have contractual increases in salary this year that we didn't have last year.
Yeah, no, I understand that, so that's your ADM with the increase, 16,747, so 16,747, 764, divided by 1,067 students is 15,696.
I think that might include Cal.
That's your cost per student, your assessment per student.
Yeah.
That's not what he's quoting. He's quoting
Estimated
the
net
assessment.
per pupil cost. Estimated net per pupil cost.
Okay, just to the town, but I'm taking what the
No.
total is.
No, that's total.
Okay. I
In
figured
order-
out what
in
they
order
have
to-
in total, all right.
In order to maintain parity, I mean, I don't have a problem, recommending that we send them a letter and say, try and keep to 1.9.
They're there now.
They're at 2.9.
It's gifts that cost more.
So it's parity and it's parity.
Still 15,600 on our town, just on our town.
Any actions, Region Seven? All we can do is write a letter and not write a recommendation. We can all make our own recommendation, comments at the budget hearing.
I think that's what we should do, let's go get the budget hearing.
Sorry?
Make our comments at the budget hearing, and move on from this.
I think it's more powerful, to be honest with you. We're gonna do that anyway. Yes. Whether one of us likes it or not. But I think that's more powerful.
I think the changes we made today are a good start to get the budget into what our constituents can at least think is a reasonable range for consideration. I think everybody knew that at the start of the meeting, 6% just wasn't happening. As it stands now, we're at 2.75% with a slight change that Noel gave. So I think that's something to take to the public hearing, consider, take feedback, like you said, from our constituents and reserve the right to make additional changes.
Dan, can you get, whatever changes we've made, can you get that electronically and send it to me or send it to August, whichever is easiest for
We
you?
can have Andy make those changes and send it to them.
Will you send it to us all?
Well, we can go with the minutes.
You haven't seen it yet. Should there be a copy of this, what he's sending us, should that go with the minutes as well?
Well, I would suggest if it's gonna go, it goes in draft form, it's not approved yet, it's part of the
Okay.
minutes. That's what we want.
Or can you just include me in that email, and then I will not file them with the minutes, but I'll keep it for the next meeting?
Sure.
Any other suggested change? We talked about, we talked about the common the other day, I think three of those two. If we've got no other changes, I'm gonna wrap it up. If there's more discussion about that or anything else, now's the time to have it.
I'd like to vote on the general government budget. I'd like to kind of vote on the general government budget, so we can solve it. So for regional, we're just gonna discuss it. Our thoughts now, along the regular tax day, with the budget hearing, so it's on here.
Set the board, but I'm happy with that.
Capital is approved, local board of education has been approved by us.
The school. And the local.
I'll throw a motion out there then to approve the total general government budget and the amount of $4,691,887.13.
As presented. Oh. There's one thing that we need to change in that we might as well change now going into this. The, Board of Education pass-through grants / REAP, that number that we're showing there of $289,000 is not the right number.
Is that revenue fund money?
It's revenue and expenses, so take it out of both of them, and it doesn't change the increase. might change the percentage by, half of a tenth of a percent.
What do you got then?
$184,912. If we take the grant numbers that, your number, my number is $5 difference, but Philip saw where the difference was. If you add up his numbers that he shows in red on his budget, it's $184,912. We had a meeting, myself, Annie, Philip, and Debbie Kelly, and went through there to get an understanding of make sure we're all on the same page in terms of how this works. And the way Dr. Phil does it, he shows the net expense. So if it's a $100,000 line item expense and he's taking a $20,000 grant against it, he shows that actually has an $80,000 expense, the $20,000 shown in red. You add up all those numbers in red, you get to $184,912. So he's showing the net of it. So he's really, in effect, he's taking in revenue, but he's not. He's just reducing his expenditures. So when you get to the town side, it needs to be neutral. So you put it in the revenue and the expenditures. If you don't put it in both, then you're missing it or double counting it. But by putting it in both, you've got it accurate. Now, they might not be exactly that amount. It might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less. If the grants come in less, what Phil does is he then charges whatever that difference is to his operating budget. Okay, so he zeroes out the grant money, whatever it is actually. So in this budget, if it doesn't come in exactly that amount, it'll show a little bit less on the revenue side, it'll show a little bit less on the expenditure side. So I'd like to have a motion that we change the.
What happened to Ricky's motion?
What was this motion?
To approve the town government budget of $4,691,000.
Yeah.
So-
Sorry, I didn't mean to make sure.
Okay,
I'd like to just point out that I think we ought to make that change to the town government budget. It doesn't really come under, it could be a separate motion, because it doesn't come under what we made. We just said the town
We
government.
can add it to my motion. The motion so far reads, motion by Reggie, I will second that, to approve the general government budget amount of $4,691,887.13 as presented. Then further,
Including a change.
Further change the Board of Education pass-through grants / REAP expenditures
And
and
revenue.
associated revenue to
184,912.
184,912.
Those are dollars.
Yes, 184,912. Dan, if you can make that change while you're at it.
All
there.
done.
Okay, so further change the Board of Education pass-through grants.
Stroke REAP.
REAP, is that two different things, grants and expenditures?
It's just slash, grants / REAP. Expenditures.
And associated revenues to $184,912.
Yes.
so it reads to approve the general government budget of $4,691,887.13 as presented, and further change the BOE pass-through grants / REAP expenditures and associated revenues to $184,912.
Do we have a second to that motion? Any discussion before we vote?
No change to the mill rate.
So,
Motion?
so from a discussion standpoint, I mean, this is, it's really, it's a second draft, but first pass as far as I'm concerned, with all of the budgets, so, I mean, I had suggestions, I think there are opportunities for savings, and, maybe over the next, few meetings, maybe they'll be addressed.
Interest as to the motion at the end. So the motion by Reggie, second by Bill Coates, to approve the general government budget of $4,691,887.13 as presented, and further change the Board of Education pass-through grants / REAP expenditures and associated revenues to $184,912.
have anything from them, Spencer?
I did not come in, I wrote it right off the.
Now, we'll have, I guess it's, as I think about it, one other meeting after the budget hearing to make a final recommendation to accept this budget for the vote and the change. Okay, any other comments before we vote? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Any other budget discussions before we wrap it up?
It's gonna be the same protocol in terms of presentation.
Yeah, I think what I'll do, what I've typically done is both of the schools go first and then the town. I don't know, you can always change that, but that's just how I've done it. And we switch them off, whichever school was first last year, we just rotate it.
You're gonna do a little presentation up front.
Yeah, just tell them where we started and what we're presenting now, how we got there.
What was the percentage increase then, Dan, for the local board of education?
1.5.
Did you shut it down?
153.
1.98
Overall.
Operating.
operating 1.53, but they got, you accounted, and they changed how you're accounting for the technology, moving that to capital.
Okay, and then your budget was 1.5% increase.
Correct.
I think that's not what we're saying, even the regular rates. Wouldn't have that whole-
Hearing nothing else, can I have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Thank you, everyone, appreciate it.
I think we can all agree to that.
All in
Seconded.
favor?
Aye.